Hey guys, Tim McAmis back in the shop again, and tonight I want to spend some of your valuable time talking about wishbone track locators. So I have a couple laid out here on the bench, and we've had a little redesign in our wishbones over the years. So this is our initial version here, which we've used forever, and it's a very good design. But you know, these cars are making more power. With more power comes more tire shake and more abuse on the rear of the car. So we decided to upgrade a little bit. Now this design this is a titanium version here, but it has a little smaller slider in it than the new one does. But this one actually is reamed to fit inside this tube. So you got a nice fit. You get a rod end in here and two rod ends on here. And we also have these little slip tubes here. They are spot welded into place, but what that does is transfer some of that energy to this tube. So instead of trying to bust on this supporting leg, it gives it a little bit of room to move with this slip tube. So like I said, we've used this for a lot of years, and it's tested and tried and true, and it does really good. But we needed to upgrade a little bit. We needed to get a little heavier duty version, and we need to change around some sizing on some stuff. So we kind of set this one aside and started with a little bit different design, which is this version right here. So one of the things that we did with our redesign was to start from scratch with a new fixturing process. So, you know, we've been doing this a long time, longer than I care to admit, but this design, the fixture for this, when we originally designed it, we didn't have the equipment that we have today, and now we've got a bunch of CNC stuff in the shop. So when we talked about redesigning this with all of our guys, we decided to make a new fixture that would help produce these. So one of the things we did was we started with this massive aluminum plate, and our guys made this fixture that they spent about 2 weeks making this thing. So it's completely adjustable, but one of the cool things about it is, you know, when we use this jig, you know, obviously this thing should be symmetrical. I mean, it's side A and B are the same, but if you put it in the jig and flip it over, it wouldn't fit exactly right in there. Well, this is not like that. Now, with this new jig, we can fit the pieces into this fixture. It is perfectly symmetrical, so it'll flip equally over from side to side. So we know that these 3 points are all in line with each other. So this center is exactly on center of these points. And then to take that step even farther, we make so many of these things, my guys were just like sick of notching this. So along with this fixture, we set up a program and we built another fixture that holds all these pieces. So this is notched in our CNC machines before we put it into the jig. So if you can imagine, we cut the tubes to length, so we cut these legs and cut these pieces all to length, and then it fits in this fixture that we built. It's aluminum, and then you tighten down this clamping device on top of it, and it leaves all the legs exposed. Well, the CNC machine will then come down and it will notch all these out. And it is perfect. I mean, the fit on these, so it's kind of amazing to watch it, but when it's done, you can snap this thing together in that jig, and there is zero gap. And when you don't have any gap, there's no pull when you weld it. So the welds are nice and tight, and there's no shrinkage of that weld to pull on that tube. So when we fit this together, these have a zero fit. And when I say they have a zero fit, I mean, when you look at it before it's welded, there is no seam. I mean, it fits 100% tight to the adjoining tube. So kind of a neat deal, and we can do a bunch of these at a time now. So when they set them up, they can make a run of 50 of these and cut all the pieces, and they will fit perfectly. So this jig that we made, this fixture, is just so nice, and they incremented it all, and so because we make a lot of these custom too, so you can get a custom size. It's adjustable for all that. So really, the first step was just to start from scratch. But some of the features, I'll kind of go over some of the differences between the two. We're going to have a much larger diameter slider in this one. So we increased the size of the slider, and then one of the problems with this design is when you welded it here, it wanted to shrink that tube a little bit. So you ended up, when you reamed it, you had to ream it, you had to spend a little more time in here because it got hard. So this design incorporates a couple of solid type Teflon coated bearings in it. And so right here where the attachment tubes hit this main body, it's not touching the slider. So there's a bearing on the end, and the end it's held in with a couple little circlip rings. So has a nice tight fit to it. And the legs are the same size. So this is all the same size tube here, but instead of making this so long and putting a tube across the back, we changed this design around and put a supporting tube here and then put a little X brace in this. So it's really nice, and it's nice and smooth. It works really well. I don't know if you can see that, but you see that step in there where that bearing is, which really made this piece a lot easier to manage, because instead of having this area here trying to resize this tube, that bearing sits out here on an unwelded surface. And you can see by the size of this, the difference in the two sliders is pretty obvious. And then with that, it became apparent we needed to increase the size of this single point here, which is a bigger rod end altogether. So they used to be all the same size. All three rod ends were the same. But this spherical bearing is bigger, the threads are bigger, the body's bigger. And one of the things that's kind of nice about it is no matter what you did with this old style rod end, as far as jamming this up, it's constantly kind of working like this to keep the rear end on center. And it would eventually loosen this jam nut up, which never really caused any problems, but it would increase the amount of play by just a little bit, that the rear end would move side to side. So it really isn't necessary for this to adjust. So if you can see, this is drilled, so this rod end is installed and this jam nut is tightened on here. Then it's drilled all the way through and this roll pin is put in here. That eliminates this ever turning again, and it's still serviceable. So if you damage this rod end or something happens here, you can just drive this roll pin out, unscrew this, put a new rod end in it, and then re-drill that hole and install that roll pin back in there. It's kind of convenient because now this is rock solid, and with the two bearings in here, it has a nice zero fit, and that coating on those bearings lets this slide real easy. Before you would want to you would have to grease this. You'd have to put some grease on it. Of course, under the car there's a lot of rubber pieces and grit from the track and little pieces of metal and stuff that would get in here. So this needed to be serviced, and a lot of times we would see a car that would come back in and the customer would say, well, it's really not handling like it was when it was new. Most of the time we would find that this slider had locked up in the wishbone. Just from the metal to metal, they hadn't serviced it, hadn't put any grease on it. So this was stuck in there. And as the rear end would travel, this was binding up. So it was a simple procedure to pull this apart, clean it up, and re-grease it, and all of a sudden the car's back to working good again. So this particular wishbone eliminated that issue too, because these bearings now have a coating on them that provides the lubrication. So we've covered all the bases with this. You can mount it in either direction, and you can find a length that'll fit your application. But we wanted to test them good on the racetrack before we put them on the site. They've held up really good. They're nice and stout, no problems that we've seen with anything. So check them out. If you got any questions, call one of our guys and they will be glad to talk to you about it. But so this new version seems to be working out very well. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.